Barbosa says, I think the negativity X game is bad because the reason why existed pre-Twitter. It's just now up and center because of social media. So these ideas and conversations have always existed, but they're just brought more into your face about it, as opposed to just being kind of living.
And they can spread, right? You have one negative friend that convinces you and all your friends to be negative on a game. It stops there. But now you and those friends can go out online and you can infect other groups with whatever line of thought. I would hope that some of the positive thinking would be just as contagious.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's actually true. But I would hope that that would be just as contagious. You know, I think Tears of the Kingdom has proven to be contagious.
Well, if you're too positive about it, you've been bought and paid for, right? So it's like, oh, Brian's really excited. Like the number of times that someone's like, how much do they pay you to say these lies? I'm like, no checks are showing up, dude. In fact, like, if they did show up, I would have to tell you about them because that would be illegal. Like, like for me, I guess being that we've been doing content creation for so long, like it's just a natural thing that it's like if somebody's paying you to say something, you're required to tell people that you're being paid to say the thing. And it's like people are just like, oh, you bought and paid for it. This game isn't a 9. It's clearly a 4. Like, based off of what scale, you weirdo? Jim Jones says, I've seen people on Twitter refuse to buy 16 because the Square Enix president made a statement doubling down on NFTs a while back. Twitter's going to do what Twitter does. Do you think NFTs has any impact on like here's the thing we can't test though. Let's say that's true. How many of those people secretly just double down on that? Like, oh, game's good. Let me just like, yeah, that public statement of like, I'm not buying this game. And, you know, oh, it's goodbye.
Creative Business Unit 3 has a very negative stance on NFTs. So if there's going to be an NFTA project out of Square Enix, Yoshi is not your guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just as far as like, if you want it to succeed, you would like a developer that's really passionate about it and is ready to tell you how great they're going to do with it.
Ooh, mm-hmm.
Shoving it down Yoshi P's throat is not going to result in a good product. So he's also kind of the golden goose right now. So if he says no to something, at least until he stops being a golden goose, he probably gets his way.
Pretty much.
So I don't think 16 or 14 is where NFTs show up. I think it's much more likely that they show up in another studio when that happens.
Yeah, if that happens, that they can launch those games, because Symbiogenesis or whatever the hell was supposed to be coming out this spring, and they opened up a Discord for it. I'm in that Discord, and it's like dead quiet. Like there's nothing happening with that right now. Maybe I don't know how NFT games work. Who knows? Now, Captain Tyler says, we also have to remember that a lot of people don't consider Final Fantasy XIV a true Final Fantasy because it's an MMO, and many fans have no experience or trust in Yoshi P and the team. A lot of people probably have no idea who Creative Business Unit 3 is.
Sure.
I agree with that.
You have to be a pretty deep fan of a publisher to be aware that there are teams within that publisher. Blizzard has teams. So when people are all ripping on Blizzard, we rip on it as a collective. But I think World of Warcraft is under, I think it's called like Team 2. They're all super generic names. So that's the other thing, is it's hard to get super excited because they don't want to spin them up as game developers. But they are on teams. And so I want to say World of Warcraft is Team 2. But they're all like super vague. They're just like numbered or something like that. And these teams exist. And so like, you have to be a pretty devout fan. Like I went to a hockey game with a friend a while back, and he was telling me how excited he was for the like assistant defensive coordinator, because what this meant for his career, because he was here. It's like, how much do you know about a sports team that you're aware of like the assistant defensive like coordinator and like where they coached before this? Like that just takes a really devout fan. To the generalized person, they're going to see the name on the door, and that's where they're going to stop. They're going to go, Final Fantasy, cool, I think I've heard that name. Oh, Square Enix, I feel like I've heard that name before. And that's where it's going to stop. So that is a fair point. And like that, ideally that's something that just comes out when the game comes out. They're like, hey, why is this good? And then all the people who are aware can go, oh, because Creative Business Unit 3 has been crushing it for a while. They've been crushing it. One of the things that I find is interesting, though, is that when we talk about the time between Final Fantasy games, like if you look at 14, you know, in that kind of horizontal way of like 14, Heaven's Word, Stormblood, you know, Shadowbringers, Endwalker, like they're the only one making an actual Final Fantasy game. If you take every expansion like a Final Fantasy game, but it just stacks on each other, right? They're the only ones who are making Final Fantasy games every 2 years. And like then in between that, you have 15, and then it's like, oh, let's take another 6 years. Now here's 16.
So I think that's essentially going to be really interesting to see 16. And I think that a big part of this, like a big part of maybe kind of a building that trust process in for the non-MMO players, is that Square Enix does need to follow up 16 with, with something significant, something to look forward to, but only when, they're within like 2 years of actually releasing the game. Because I don't think one of the things that has really hurt Square Enix's, reputation personally is 10-year projects that like never seem to like come together until like the 11th hour, and then you're like, okay,
you can't do 10-year projects anymore.
You can't.
Can you imagine designing a game for today in 2013? I'm aware I'm just saying the current year minus 10, but it sounds like a long time ago.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago. Yeah.
Some crap has hit the fan since then.
Yeah, and Mandrake is making kind of a counterpoint regarding like the non-MMO players though, but like if for the MMO players, if it wasn't for like that relationship, maybe 16 wouldn't be a game that we actually went and were excited about. Like if you were like, oh, I'm like I came from World of Warcraft. I've never played a Final Fantasy game, and now I'm playing Final Fantasy 14. Oh, the team behind this is also making 16. Is it an MMO? It's not an MMO. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Maybe I'll give it a shot, based off of that experience. So hopefully that ends up kind of, evening itself out.
What'll hurt them is if they found Final Fantasy 14 through other MMOs.
Yeah.
They probably didn't come from a PS5 based MMO to Final Fantasy. And so now you're limiting yourself to that group of people that also own PS5s.
Mm-hmm.
Because this thought you just described, it would be pretty bold to say, I like Final Fantasy 14. Oh, they're making a single player game on a console I don't own. Like that represents a lot more disposable income than, I think everybody has. There are some people that have it, and that's great, but that's not universal.
Yeah. It says that they're willing to bet that 80% of the people refusing to buy 16 for whatever reason on Twitter will be playing it day one, assuming that those people are also PS5 owners, because it is asking a bigger ask.
Cross-platform, man. Just picture if your Final Fantasy 14 launcher just had 16 for sale right there. You could just buy it right there and boot it up from right there. Every time I boot up WoW, I've been aware of the current state of Diablo 4 pre-orders because it's on my launcher.
Every day.
And so like there are people who won't buy Diablo 4, but a lot of those people are either because they don't like that type of game, or it's because they have an issue with Blizzard, in which case they don't have the launcher anyway. So you're advertising, so it's home field advantage to be able to advertise on your launcher. And be able to buy from right inside the launcher. It knew my credit card information, it asked for the confirmation code and the expiration date. And so I put those in, and then I bought it, and then it downloaded it, and I could have booted up World of Warcraft while I waited. That's a process that Square Enix just doesn't have. And it just, so maybe there's like PS5 Final Fantasy 14 players that have that experience, but that's not the majority of the Final Fantasy 14 players who choose to dip a toe into 16.
Yeah. So one kind of final comment before we wrap up for the day, Earth Demon talking about it's different making a single player game versus an expansion because you get a ton of already created resources, both assets, code, and you can't have that in single player. At the same time, though, you also don't run into the risk of decisions that were made 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that you're like, well, I would want to do this, but we don't have that flexibility, etc. But yes, single player games versus the multiplayer, I think, are way more complex to balance, to maintain, and to develop for as well. But the ideal in this case is that, whether they do this or not, you take 16. If people are really happy with it and the combat's fun and people want more, you take, hey, we've got the engine, we got the combat, let's refine that and use that as kind of a base and say, hey, 2 years, 3 years from now, here's 17. And we don't have to redefine all these things. We don't we can do certain things within it that make it different and stand out, but we don't have to necessarily start from ground zero every single time. And that would be my hope, that what we see with the future of Final Fantasy as a single player mainline, game. And then at some point have Yoshi P make another MMO, because I know he said that he's wanted to do that. And I think that would be kind of really cool to see what that take would be on, But again, now we're talking about designing.
Picture him in his house, like Steven Sharif style, like just chatting with us. He keeps it closer to the best than that.
Oh, much, much closer. And that will be interesting to see what happens with Ashes, because That game is, man, I really want them to win. Like I do. It looks on paper awesome.
Relentless transparency has been their entire marketing strategy.
Relentless.
And it's what we've asked for
Yeah.
as gamers. Now we get to find out why has nobody else been doing it?
Why
is
does
it good?
anybody do this?
Because if it works, that'll become the norm.
Yeah. Oh, this is how you do it.
If it doesn't work, devs are going to go, yeah, that's why I was keeping my mouth shut before.
The whole time. Well, with the whole, when they were doing the Anthem stuff, the guy like comes out and is like, we're going to be real transparent about our process, etc.
Sounds nice.
Sounds great.
Nice.
And I was like, I said that sounds like a huge risk. I was like, I think people are going to be like, oh wow, we get to see how the mud's made. Like that's okay. Like it's interesting for like 2 people. And then everybody else is like getting mad. It's like, no, we're gonna try to argue over balance numbers like in
those belong at conventions. That's the place to put those.
That's
conventions, you have a dev panel. Everybody that doesn't care is out eating from food trucks. And the people that care, they can sit there and ask their questions.
Yeah. All right, Chris, has Diablo 4 finished downloading for you?
Oh yeah.
He's ready to go. Guys, hang out. Chris will be doing some Diablo this week. We've got lots of stuff planned as we get into the news of like, this is the Summer Game Fest. This is used to be E3. Now that has been replaced. So it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and broadcast. Keep Chris live over on Twitch. And then for those of you, we'll be back. I'm planning for the next show Friday. So we can get some hands-on Diablo impressions from Chris for this week, as well as any other developments that kind of break out, as I'm assuming we're going to hear some really exciting news about New World, Throne of Liberty, Blue Protocol, and so many other things. All right, guys, ending broadcast. We've been it out.